Quite a lot of you have got in touch and asked about photographing interiors and the particular problems that that poses. Now, by chance, Lizzie, who runs this beautiful place called The Mill, which is just around the corner from me, has had the bar completely refitted and needs some pictures of it. So we thought we'd come down and talk you through the various sort of steps and problems that you're likely to face. If you've been on a one-to-one tuition day with me, there's a good chance you've stayed here. Trust me, it's a lovely, lovely spot. So here we go. This is the new refurbished bar at The Mill. It's completely beautiful. There's lots of lovely new touches, like, you know, the driftwood here in the new bar, new furniture, and it all looks completely gorgeous. When you're going to photograph an interior, you've got to go slowly. You have to think this through one piece at a time. You have to think about the problems and the issues and what you want to photograph. Now, I've already had a chat with Lizzie, the owner, and she's told me what she wants to get out of the pictures. So first of all, let's have a look around the room. Let's have a little think about this. It's a beautiful room, as you can see. And I really, really love all these little highlights. You see where the sun's coming through here, and we've got highlights on the table. But look, if you look at my face, when I stick my face into that sun, which is probably there, that's quite bright, isn't it? That could be a problem for the camera to capture detail in the highlights and the shadows. So we're going to do, first off, an overview of the whole room. The biggest problem is this highlight shadow thing. Now, of course, I could put in a load of flashlights or something like that. I don't really want to do it because that will kill the mood and the feel of the room. Now, it can, of course, be done with artificial lighting, but I'm going to spend an hour or more setting up lighting and all that kind of stuff to get the room beautifully lit. This place is actually open already, and I've already had to ask someone if they wouldn't mind having a coffee out there. Now, we don't want to interfere with their business, and, you know, they can't really afford to shut down, so we can spend a couple of hours lighting it. So my preferred option is to use available light because it captures the mood and the feel of the place that we're in. And I'm going to do some post-production, if necessary, to make it all kind of work. Right, so what kit am I going to use to get this done? You saw me carrying this big baby in through the door, didn't you? Use a tripod. Don't even consider doing something like this without one. And the heavier, more sturdy the tripod is, the better. Because if it's light and the camera wobbles or moves, or somebody walks past, if you've got a wooden floor, just somebody walking past like that, that can make the tripod wobble and vibrate as the floor vibrates. We don't want that to happen. Sturdier the tripod is, the better. I've had this one for years. It weighs a ton. It's great for this sort of job. Right, my trusty old D300, checking that the lens is clean. It could use a little bit of a wipe. I'm using my 10 to 20 millimeter zoom lens. It's a wide angle, it's only a Sigma, it's nothing particularly fancy, and it's not a high, you know, wide aperture f2.8 or anything like that. You don't need super wide apertures for this sort of photography because I want depth of field, I want things to be sharp. So I don't need that super wide aperture. I want to probably use quite a small aperture. I'm probably going to be at around f16 because I want lots of depth of field. I want to see as much of this room nice and pin sharp as humanly possible. You'll notice I've got a flash on there. There's a reason for that, and it's because I'm going to demonstrate something to you. First off, ISO. We want fine, excellent quality. So I've gone to 200 ISO. That's our lowest ISO setting. Manual mode. This needs to be done slowly. You need to think it through and control it yourself. So we're going into manual mode. I've already said I want lots of depth of field. So I'm going to f16. I could go to f22, but I'm going to back it off a bit to f16 because I know that's where the lens is going to perform at its best. White balance. We've got all sorts of different colours going on in here. These lights up here, they're going to be producing yellow light. I don't know, you may be able to see it on me as I'm standing here. We've got daylight streaming in through the windows. That's going to be a bit blue. Without setting up a full lighting rig, there's not much you can do about that. So we're going to work with the available light and sort it out after. So therefore, I'm shooting in RAW mode because that gives me the ability to control things afterwards. This isn't cheating doing this stuff afterwards, by the way. It's all just part of the way imaging works. I've, for some reason, taken, there it is. I'm looking for the quick release that holds the camera onto my tripod. I took it off the other day for something we were doing. I think we were filming in the street and I just wanted this big lumpy piece of metal off the bottom of the camera while I was doing it. Right, let's just get that on there nice and tight. That's my quick release for the tripod. That means I can get it on and off here very quickly if I need to, you know, without all that fiddly twiddly stuff. Let's have a look at a composition. Let's start off with an overall composition of the room. To do this, live view is brilliantly useful. So we're going to select live view. There we go. Now, you can see in the back there, I can see what the room looks like in the back of my camera. I've got my grid lines because I also need to make sure that my verticals are upright and they're not doing this or that or skewing around, which is really easy to happen. Right, first off, let's get our composition. And the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to use these doors as a frame. So it's kind of like, well, pretty much as you are now. You're looking through the door. There's maybe a little bit of door either side and the room beyond, because it's a bit more inviting than just room. Do you know what I mean? Now, hopefully Lizzie won't come after me with the large axe, but I'm going to take that off the door so it all looks, you know, nice and proper. I also noticed the other side of the room, there's another one of these. Look out for things like that. It's really, really easy to miss them while you're kind of lost in the complexities of photography and setting up your camera. But it's really, really important to go around the room and check for things like that, because when you look at the picture afterwards, you'll kick yourself and then maybe have to spend a load of time messing around trying to sort it out. Now the staff have been here and got the chairs all lined up nicely, apart from that one over there, which I moved when I came in here to put my camera bag on. So I'm going to sort that out. I'm also just going to do little detail things like this. I'm just going to turn these round so the word "the mill" is facing the direction of the camera. Same with these menus. Now, you're probably not really going to see it, but it's just little touches like that which you might kick yourself for later on. I do quite a lot of consultancy work with estate agents, helping them get the best out of their interior photography. And it's little touches like that which can make all the difference. It's almost subconscious. It's probably not so much a case of, oh, look at that, it drives me mad. The little things that as you add them together, it makes a difference, but you don't quite know what it is. I'm just going to leave that there, because even though it's going to be really, really tiny in the picture, it's just sort of part of the room, isn't it? And a last little look around, make sure there's nothing I've left lying around. I've got no signs everywhere. No, I think all that looks pretty good. So the room's looking nice. I just want to pull that chair forward a little, get that door open a bit. You see what I mean? It's attention to detail. It is a lot of faffing about. Right, battery will go flat, so lift the live view on. Now, I'm going to come back out here so we can try and get this shot looking in through. Here comes, here you go. No worries, Adam. Sorry, am I getting in your way again? Restaurant manager with goods. Right, so let's get the camera and the composition set up. First off, let's just use that live view and get a rough idea. I like the metal plates on either side. Adam, it's all right, you carry on, mate. Yeah, I'm going to be a good 5 or 10 minutes getting this all set up anyway, so don't worry. It's another thing, of course. Try not to interfere. You know, this is for the commercial running of the business. You know, these guys have got to do their jobs as well. If you're lucky enough to be somewhere that's your own property, or it's not actually, you know, working, you know, it's not a commercial going concern, it's not quite so tricky because you have a lot more time to devote to things. I'm bringing the shot over here. This is about moving around. Have a look in the back. I don't know if you can you see in the back, Janie?
Yeah.
Right. So this shot's quite nice. I like the doors and the brass plates here. But I'm thinking that if I open that door a bit more and bring the camera over here, we've still got the bar area, but we've got a bit more of what's going on in that corner. So we can see more of the room. So I'm just easing the camera over here. So we're still looking across this door. Do you notice that vertical has started to bend that way as I moved it? This is always very tricky. Look, you see, as I tilt the camera, look at those verticals. They're now going off at that angle. If I tilt it that way, look, they're cutting in like that. go and watch our convergence film, and that will explain why that happens and what you need to do to avoid it. We just have to make sure that things are all nice and straight and they line up. One of the reasons I'm down quite low is to avoid that convergence, because if I was standing up straight, that's Adam doing his own fillings. He'll start screaming in a minute. If I was up high, I'd have to look down, and that would make the verticals do this. So we need to be parallel with what's going on in the room. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Next, I just need to open this a bit. Do you need to come through? So if you do, just carry on. We're going to be a little while setting up. Right, that is as far as that door opens. So, another look. There's a little bit too much door. So let's sneak into the room a bit. All these little movements do make a difference. What's that over there? Okay, it's the back of a chair, so that's quite good. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. Having a grid display on in the back of the camera makes an enormous difference because you can see what your verticals are doing. It helps you line things up and make sure they're straight. Don't worry that there's quite a lot of ceiling in there at the moment, because again, this image may get cropped. Because we don't know where it's going to go. It could be in a magazine, it could be on a website, you know, things are going to be done with it. So a bit of space top and bottom doesn't hurt. Now we know that the composition is where we want it. I'm going to lock my big heavy tripod. So now I can forget the composition. It's there, it's done. Next thing, where am I going to focus? I want front to back sharpness. With a very short lens, you've got tons of depth of field. Therefore, it's relatively easy to achieve that. We've already set a very, very small aperture, which is going to keep that depth of field going. Let's take that off live view. Let's just put that onto single shot. There we go. I am going to bring up my exposure. Sorry, I've got to focus. Focus is where I was, so I'm going to look through the viewfinder. You can't watch me do this, unfortunately. But what I'm doing is focusing on this chair here. I'm focusing right there. Why am I choosing there and not over there? So you need single point autofocus to do this, to make sure the camera's focusing as you want it. If you put it on kind of like all over, sort it out yourself mode, you don't know where it's going to focus. It could go anywhere. I want it here because with a very short lens, I have an inherently deep depth of field. At f16, that depth of field is probably going to stretch from about here all the way to the other end of the room. Why not focus here then? If you think of that block of focus, you think of the focus as a block which moves backwards and forwards. Watch the depth of field film for this. I want to ensure that my depth of field is coming back this way far enough to keep this sharp if I possibly can. And I'm going to test it. But the place to focus is probably about here, because at f16 really anything from about a couple of 3 feet in front of the camera should be in focus. My starting point is here. I'm then going to shoot a test image, look at it by zooming in and adjust accordingly. So I think that's done. White balance. Did I start talking about that and not complete it? I probably did. I just want to check it. White balance. Right now this is set on incandescent, which we don't want. I'm just going to use the sunny white balance. I did start talking about it, didn't complete it. There's yellow lights in the ceiling, there's daylight coming in. With a raw file, it doesn't really matter that much because you can sort it out after the event. So we might have a bit of bluiness in the windows and a bit of yellowiness inside the bar, but again, it doesn't matter. When you're in a nice cozy environment like this, a little bit of warmth in the colour doesn't really matter. But again, we can tweak it in post-production. It's always worth standing around and looking at things. In the days when I used to smoke on jobs all the time, I always used to set up the camera like this and then have a cigarette. While we were talking, and it's worth doing that so that you just look and think and take your mind out of it for a minute. While I took my mind out of it and spoke to you about white balance, I noticed this. Look, it's only a silly thing, but no, it's just kind of untidy and it doesn't match the other bits and pieces. So I'm just going to, other bits and pieces, you can't call a place like this bits and pieces, can you? Bar mats. Right, I really think that's okay, but this is why it's worth slowing down and thinking about things. My camera bag is down here, but that doesn't matter because we can't see it because it's just behind there and we're looking in through here. So next, let's check that depth of field and start making sure we've got the correct exposure. What I haven't done is get my, if I can find it, cable release. There it is. Why am I using a cable release? Chances are my shutter speed is going to be quite slow for this because of the low ISO and the small aperture. So I want to use a cable release to make sure there is no movement of my camera whatsoever as I'm pressing the shutter. Even with a tripod as heavy as this, there is a chance that the camera might just vibrate a bit, and I don't want that. I want to be absolutely certain my picture is clean and sharp. Good. I think we're now en route. Double check. Focus is in the right place. Little trick. I often flick it from autofocus. I use autofocus to focus where I want to. And then I flick it, when I can see down the side of the camera, onto manual. So that if I press the shutter button, but I've changed the composition, the focal distance won't shift. What does the light meter say? Let's bring up that in the back. As you can see, we've got f16. At an eighth of a second at f16, the light meter is saying we're a little bit underexposed. So I'm leaving f16 because I want the depth of field and slowing down the shutter speed till the light meter says the exposure is correct, and that's a fifth of a second. I am using which metering mode? There are lots of things to think about, aren't there? I'm going to use evaluative. I was on... What does it say? That's still correct. Yeah. That's cool. No, sorry, that's right. Talking to you, I'm not concentrating what I'm doing. I was right, I was talking nonsense, ignore me. I'm using evaluative metering mode, which is measuring the entire scene and averaging it. It doesn't really matter, there's no point fiddling with spot focusing because you can adjust it by looking in the back of the camera. So everything's set. Let's take a picture. And looking in the back there, I can see where there are highlights. Now, something which is a nuisance. Since we got here, the sun's moved in the sky. It's now hitting square on to that end of the bar, which is causing this very bright highlight just here, which wasn't there earlier. It's going to be very, very difficult to get detail into that. That is such a shame. The only thing I can try and do is to move the camera. I don't think I can. No, it's still going to hit that, and we're going to have a completely burnt out end. Okay, moral of the story is get here early and make sure that everything is all done properly before you get going. The only thing I could do in that circumstance is to come back tomorrow, or do it later in the day when the sun's moved, or start fiddling around with lighting. We've already said that's not an option. Right, it's very warm in here. We know that wasn't meant to happen. We know that our exposure is supposedly correct, but it looks a little bit too dark to me. If I bring that up and look at the histogram, see the histogram is showing me there's lots of darkness in this image and a big spike of brightness. Well, that's what that little area there is. So I'm going to have to lift the exposure a bit and then check to see if there's any detail. Bring up our light meter again. So to increase the exposure, I'm going to slow the shutter speed down a bit. Let's take that down. Now that says where it's jumping around, but yeah, that's a little bit more exposure. Let's go one more and see what happens. We hold that, take the picture, see what's in the back. If I flick between the two, do you see how the histogram has jumped to the right? And you can see how the picture is a little brighter. That's better. That's going to give us better detail, better rendition of what's happening in the shadows. But I'm worried about that bright highlight. Let's just keep looking around the image. Is the back of the room sharp? Yeah, I think it is. Let's have a little look around, make sure the clock's nice. There's our chair. There's a bright highlight there, but I don't think it matters. It sort of adds to the mood of the room a bit. Here's our menus, which we turn around the right way so we can just see that everything is facing the camera. Yeah, I think that's all nice and sharp. We shouldn't have a problem with that at all. Okay, my concern is that bright highlight. What I'm going to do is increase the exposure. Basically what we're doing is bracketing. We're just doing it slowly instead of using an auto bracket or something like that. Let's bring up our light meter again. So we've done one with a lot more exposure. I'm going to do one a bit brighter still to make sure that I've got all those shadow details. There we go. So there's our shot. That's brighter again. You see, I might be able to rescue that because RAW files have so much data in them. We've got lots and lots of detail. Okay, in case I can't rescue it, I'm going to take another shot at a much lower exposure, which is for the bright areas of the picture. Let's have a go at that. So on my light meter here, I'm going to change that exposure from +1. We're going to take that down here. I'm going to go minus a little bit, because then I know that I've got lots and lots of detail in those very, very bright shadowed areas. Again, let's just take the picture. Now, let's have a quick look at the histogram. This is what I mean by going slowly. This is much darker than that. Look, you see this block of darkness, which is the left-hand end of the histogram, jumps to the left. It's because I reduced the exposure, and you can see it there. You can also see how the light's changed. Look, see there's a highlight. That highlight, look. 1 minute it's there, and then it isn't. That's the sun moving through the sky. That shows you how fast you have to work with this stuff. The reason that it's really useful to have that highlight exposure as well as the shadow exposure is because I can then combine those two in the computer if I need to. So I know I've lost no highlight detail, but I've still maintained the atmosphere of the whole room, which is what we need to do. We don't want people seeing something that's completely different. I'm going to show you briefly what would happen if I put a flash on. Now I'm only using my speed light on the top of the camera. If I just put on a flash, a fill-in flash of, let's say, minus 1. So I'm going to put in a fill-in flash of -1 and just bounce it off the ceiling. It's going to kill the mood of the room to quite an extent, I think you'll find. Look at this. Look in the back here. It's pretty good, and it could be an escape. But look how the lighting is totally different. And when I say it's killing the mood, yes, it is lighting it up a bit, but look, we've got a black shadow going on down here, which we didn't have before. You know, that black shadow doesn't belong there, does it? There is no black shadow, it's the flash that's causing that black shadow. So that's not so brilliant. If you did need to use that technique, all you can do is move your camera in a bit so that this door can't cast a shadow. But then what will happen is you lose that depth to the shot. Look, we flip between them again. The doors kind of lead you in the composition. By losing the doors so we lose the shadow, there's a sort of element of, it's not so inviting, it's lost something. So there we go. That's, I guess, the first part. This is capturing the image. This is how to record it and get it onto your camera. As I've said many, many times, photography is a three-stage process. You have to think about the shot you're going to take. You then have to put together the different photographic blocks to capture that image. And then the third and final stage is your post-production. Post-production isn't cheating, and I say this a lot too. It always happened. In the old days, there would be dodging and burning in a print, and if you were shooting with slide film, well, you wouldn't cheat, but you would add lights, and there was a huge amount of skill involved in that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that skill. It's brilliant, and I used to have to do it. But it saves a lot of time and a lot of aggro for your client if you can shoot it in camera and deal with it in the post-production. So that's going to be the next step for this image. Post-producing the image from a RAW file into a JPEG and getting all the tones looking lovely.